Hello, welcome to another World of UX podcast. This is your host, Dr. Darren Hood. Thanks for taking the time to join us today. A special welcome to those of you joining us for the first time. We're going to return to our series today where we've been talking about UX maturity from a perspective of the harsh realities of UX maturity, taking a broad look not only at what UX maturity is, but the very many elements and facets that impact it or are dependent upon it. Today, we're going to talk about UX maturity and myth management. Going to coin a phrase a little bit there. Some of you may or may not have heard of what's known as a UX myth. You know, if you go to uxmyth.com, we're going to tap into some of their content here shortly. It's a really great educational resource. I'm sort of surprised they've never really expanded on this over the years, but they just established this site at one time where they compiled 34 different UX myths and they just left it. They might be adding some additional data from time to time. I don't know, but it has really been a great resource. It's got to be one of the most interesting sites from that perspective that I've ever seen. And that they said it and they forgot it. They just put it out there, but this information has remained valuable. They've only had one bit of information that became outdated. And as I scroll through the site right in the moment, I'm not seeing that outdated piece. It looks like they may have removed that. There used to be something out here about Macromedia Flash, which is no longer a thing, but I'm not seeing it. I'm not seeing that as, oh, no, there it is, myth number 18. Flash is, or rather used to be evil. Folks used to believe that that was a myth, but it's no longer a thing. So we can ignore the Flash piece. So 34 myths, 33 still relevant, some fantastic stuff out there. We're only going to talk about a few of those today, but let's get into it here quickly. What basically are UX myths? Let's lay a little foundation as always. Basically speaking, a UX myth is a type of misinformation. It's something that people believe that's not really accurate. It's something people subscribe to, that people really, they're not doing themselves any favors. And if you embrace it and you apply it, you can easily create additional problems. So a UX myth is an issue. A UX myth can be defined as a concept that masquerades as precepts or solutions, things that we should depend upon, things that we should be paying attention to. And you'll hear a few of them today, a lot of these that are on the site. If you go and check it out, you'll find a lot of the things that are out there. They're going to sound familiar because people do teach them as things that we should be paying attention to and things that we should be ordering our behaviors around or centering around. And it's not the case at all. Another definition, the third definition that I want to tap into is one that really sort of comes from the UX myth site. It's that a myth is a misconception. A myth, usually when people hear the term myth, they're thinking about a story that somebody just made up and it's not really true and it's there for entertainment purposes. The big movie that's out right now, The Odyssey, is considered to be mythology. And so we know that it didn't happen, but we go and we tap into it and we, for the entertainment value, from the perspective of storytelling, we get into it, but we know none of this stuff ever really happened, even if some of it is based on truth. When you think about a myth from that perspective, a lot of the things that you see on the UX myth site, it follows that same mindset. It's mythology. It's people believe it. Some people will look at it, not for entertainment value, but they see it as an accurate and a reliable tenet that we can use to govern our business operations. And UX myths are problematic. They do create problems. I talk all the time about the fact that misinformation was not a thing in UX. Practically everything that we encountered early in my career, we could just rely on it. Man, you could read every book. You could go to every conference, everything that everybody would present, every concept I've ever seen in a book, at least at the time, was something that we could embrace. When misinformation started to creep into UX around 2011 or so, a lot of these things actually came from the put yourself out there mindset. People don't realize that. People were told, put yourself out there, which was basically a myth. And they put themselves out there, but things like that started to become the source of a lot of these myths. People trying to sound smart, people wanting to be heard, people just saying something for the sake of saying something when they had no data, nothing at all, no observations, nothing to substantiate the statements on. Problem is, a lot of those things started to gain traction. A lot of those things started to be shared and spread, and many of them actually became commonly heard, commonly placed thoughts. And because people kept hearing them, they assumed them to be true, and that wasn't the case at all. Now, how does UX maturity tie into this? Well, the higher somebody's UX maturity is, the less susceptible you are to myths, the less prone you are to believing them, and the less you are likely to embrace them. As a matter of fact, when a person's UX maturity level is higher, you will have some data, you'll have some viable reasoning that informs you to let you know, no, I don't know about that. At least let me dig into it a little bit, because UX maturity helps you build a filter. It helps us to understand what's worthy of acceptance. It helps us to understand and question what is it that we need to dig into a little bit more. And that's at the core of who UX professionals are. And I'll use the phrase again, pure UX professionals. When somebody is practicing pure UX, we are going to be more selective about what we embrace and what we subscribe to. So let's get into the UX myths just a little bit. Let's look at 5 of them. We'll keep it really brief for the purpose of this episode, and you can always go out and check those out. And I'm sure we'll talk about some of the other ones from time to time, but we're just going to look at 5. And I'm just going to look at the first 5, and we'll give you a little commentary on each one. Myth number 1. A lot of people believe that they'll put all of this great content on the web and that people are going to read it, all the text and everything. People will read on the web. That is actually a myth. And so when you see content management initiatives or content strategy, better known as initiatives, and you see stakeholders trying to give you paragraphs and paragraphs upon paragraph of text to put out on a website, because people assume that folks are going to read because they believe that myth, that people read on the web. People do not read on the web, they scan, which is why it's important to understand how to write for digital experiences and know that does not justify UX writing. That is a position that is a myth. There are mythical positions in UX that have been established because people believe myths, or people have lower UX maturity, so they do not understand how things work. They don't understand the history. People that don't understand history of UX, that's going to create a problem from a UX myths perspective and cause people to embrace things that they should not. Folks, people do not read on the web. You need to present content, text-based content, when possible, in ordered or unordered lists. If they are steps in a process, it should be an ordered list. In other words, they should be numbered. If it's just points that are being made, then those can be presented in an unordered list, also known as a bulleted list. Things like that help people to scan. You need to make sure that your visual hierarchy is sound. Make sure that your H1s, your H2s, your H3s, your headings are structured as such so people can see it, because people will bounce from heading to heading in their scanning, and then they'll make a decision if they do want to read something, but you just got to give them the cues to be able to do that. But do people read on the web? Nope, they don't. Even if they're looking at a PDF, they're still not going to read on the web. Once somebody is looking at something in a browser window, the way that they consume that information is different than if they are holding it in their hand. People read a magazine. They won't read a magazine, an e-zine. They even scan e-zines. People they change. When they're looking in a browser or in a window, I should say, in a monitor, things will change. And so make sure that you understand that people read on the web. That should become a part of your UX maturity growth to take that factoid and then begin to, again, order your behavior, your thought processes, the things you tend to believe based on the facts associated with this topic, and then design in accordance with that. If you design knowing that people do not read on the web, that is a myth, you will be equipped to provide a more sound user experience. Myth number 2, and I'll give you the myth up front. I started with commentary on that last one, but myth number 2, content should be accessible in 3 clicks. So now this is focusing on websites, the way that this particular myth is structured, but we can expand on it for the purpose of digesting it and just think that about the fact that all pages should be accessible within 3 clicks. You can look at it from that perspective. But what this is really getting at is click counting. Click counting in particular. And if you go to that myth on the site and dig into it, you'll see additional resources that are addressing exactly that. They're trying to let people know that counting click is not the thing that a lot of people think it is. And you hear a lot of stakeholders, we need to get there and few clicks. People click a lot. People will give comments. They will, during UX research initiatives, people will say, there sure is a lot of clicking here. That is said because the concept of counting clicks was something that really caught on and spread a lot. And the person who first started saying it was saying it because they were trying to sound smart. Users don't count clicks. Even when they say that they do, they're not. They're not sitting there going 1 click, 2 clicky, clicky, 3 clicky, clicky. They're not doing that. They never did do that. I've seen a lot of live user research sessions where people were performing different tasks and looking at content. And in all the years I have observed user experience research sessions live, people did not click or count. People did not count clicks. Folks, that is not a thing. And if you focus on trying to provide information within a certain number of clicks, what you will find is that that will easily detract from the user experience because you're just trying to meet a requirement of clicks and you're no longer focusing on the viability of the content or rewarding people, helping them to reset mentally as they're going through an experience. You can actually provide more clicks and give a better user experience in some cases, depending upon how the overall experience is being structured. So click counting, folks, period, which is what this myth is addressing, is a myth. We're not trying to provide it within 5 clicks. You might be able to provide it within 6 and give a more meaningful and a more substantive experience, whether it's 3 or 4. Are you really going to split hairs between 3 or 4? Are you going to split hairs between 2 or 3? The name of the game is not click counting. The name of the game is efficiency. Instead of counting clicks, measure the efficiency of the user experience. And if the efficiency of the user experience is sound, you will find that those comments, even the ones that you get from those users who are trying to sound smart, in many cases, yeah, that's what they're doing. You'll find that even those people will no longer mention anything about clicks because the experience was fulfilling. So if you focus on delivering a fulfilling experience instead of counting clicks, then you've got your solution. You'll find a better means to an end, if you will, as opposed to counting clicks. Not dependable, not trustworthy, not desirable, not really solving any problems. Matter of fact, some of those same people that say there's too many clicks, you can give them less clicks and they still may say the same thing. You know why? Because you focused on counting clicks and you didn't focus on fulfilling the experience to make it more wholesome and more friendly, more useful. Do that. And you'll find that those offbeat comments will subside. Myth number 3 says that people don't scroll. And this is associated with another old myth that things had to be presented above the fold. Above the fold was another phrase that became popular, that people just latched onto. And next thing you know, everybody's talking about above the fold, above the fold, above the fold. And a lot of people, when they said it, they thought that it made them sound smart. Even some UXers would talk about presenting things above the fold, and they thought that it made them sound smart. Truth be told, everything does not have to be above the fold. Everything can't be above the fold. So what are we even talking about? It's not even possible for everything in every situation to be above the fold. There is something that I've always referred to that we can do to help people to understand, because that's part of the concept. That's part of the way that it came about. People thought that if people don't know that there's content beneath the fold, that they won't scroll down there to find it. Well, there's two schools of thought on that. Number one, your power users, which you don't design for power users predominantly, but I'm just mentioning this so we understand. The power user knows that there's additional information because they'll look at the scroll bar. The scroll bar is an indicator that there is additional information on that page, and the scroll bar changes based on the volume of information that might be beneath the fold. So that's their visual cue. For the lower 25 percentile, and if you design for the lower 25 percentile of your user base, you're going to meet everybody's needs. So that's something we should always do. But there's a concept I've always called peaking. If you present information so that it's not cut off, that's the problem that came from that really may have been the reason behind people talking about the fold, because what would happen in many instances was that you would have the fold and you would have information beneath the fold, but people, that lower 25 percentile, the people that are not looking at the scroll bar, they need to be able to see that there's something there. If only part of it is peaking or appearing above the fold, that's the cue to let those folks know that something else is there. Now, the next piece of that is that information needs to suggest that it has value. So if you have enough of the information that's beneath the fold showing at least part of it at that break point, then people will realize there's something there and at least something to pique my curiosity to make me want to scroll to at least see what's down there. If you present information so that people can see it, and always present it in such a way so that people will see, hey, there is something else down here, you might want to check it out, then you resolve that problem. People will scroll if you will give them a reason to. If you don't give people a reason to scroll, then the myth is inaccurate and then people won't scroll. But to just flat out say that people don't scroll is not accurate. It's not an accurate concept. So you don't have to spend a whole bunch of time trying to make sure that you want to have everything above the fold, but it is responsible to make sure that the information is peaking so that that lower 25 percentile, those users that are not looking at the scroll bar, can have a cue to be aware, hey, there's information down here, might want to take a look. If you do that, then you're being responsible, and your UX maturity, that awareness of this concept and how to get around it, is going to inform your design, and you're going to be better off for it. Your team's going to be better off for it. The business is going to be better off for it. The users are going to win, and that's what we're going after. Myth number 4. This is a sort of a big one, but a lot of people think that design is about making a website look good. That's exactly what myth number 4 says. A lot of people think that. Matter of fact, a lot of stakeholders believe it. A lot of clients believe it. A lot of users believe it. A lot of UXers believe it, especially a lot of the visual designers that came into the UX world and never really transitioned in. They focus mostly on the design looking good. And they think that's what design is about. Design is not about making the site look good. That is icing on the cake. If you have icing on the cake, but the cake is terrible, the icing is not going to make up for the cake being terrible. The cake needs to be solid. So design is about solving problems. Design is about facilitating, about meeting user needs. That's what design is about. It is inclusive of the aesthetic part, the looking good, but it is not dependent upon that, and it is not dominated by the aesthetics or the visual appeal. Don Norman talked about emotional design impact years ago in one of his books, The Design of Everyday Things. And a lot of times when something looks good, people assume that it works well. Well, if your site looks good, but it doesn't work well, you've basically lied to your customers. You've lied to stakeholders to make them think that it's going to do more and that it has more value. But it is the ability to find what somebody is looking for, the information that they're looking for. It's the ability to perform, to complete tasks, to initiate tasks. That's what people are coming to do. They're not coming to have their fancy tickled, so to speak, because of how it looks. Yes, everybody loves a good looking website. Everybody loves that it looks good, but that goes away. That dopamine moment goes away very, very quickly, and the person gets right back to the task at hand. And if they cannot perform the task at hand, they're going to get frustrated. They're going to start engaging in what Steve Krug most wonderfully put as engaging in mental chatter. They're going to start talking to themselves. That's the beginning of that irritation perspective, and that's what we don't want to do. UXers are supposed to be offsetting irritation. They're supposed to be offsetting annoyance. And there is an annoyance threshold. People will get upset to a particular degree, and once they hit that annoyance threshold, they're looking for alternatives. It is our job as UX professionals to help to offset that, to mitigate any annoyance that might come into play. When we do that, then we're succeeding, and our level of UX maturity is going to be reflected by how well we do it, whether or not we're aware of it, offsetting that annoyance. And aesthetics doesn't do it. As a matter of fact, aesthetics can actually make it worse. It can actually trigger annoyance because we said that it worked well by making it look good, when in fact, it was quite the opposite. So design is not about making a website look good, folks. It's about solving problems and about making the website work well, and then putting icing on the cake. Yeah, cake with good icing. Icing can make that experience better, but it doesn't make up for it. So forget the icing, folks, until it's time. Lastly, myth number 5. And I love this, and I really love the fact that they talked about this at the time that they did, because accessibility has only been increasing in importance and its awareness over the last few years. But myth number 5 says accessibility is expensive and difficult. Both are incorrect. Both are incorrect. It is expensive to ignore accessibility. It's not expensive to engage in trying to account for accessibility. On the site, they talk about the fact that accessibility helps you to reach a bigger audience. They talk about the fact that an accessible site always has better usability. An accessible website is SEO friendly. Accessibility has additional benefits like faster download times, cross-browser compatibility, easier content management. All these are listed on the page where they're addressing this particular myth. In addition, accessibility is not difficult. You just need to have somebody working on it who's well-versed in trying to achieve proper levels of accessibility within the experience. So there's nothing difficult about it. If you put the wrong person over a particular thing, it's always going to be difficult. It's not just accessibility, it's anything. But if you find a qualified person who understands how to achieve proper levels of accessibility, how to evaluate how well the site is conveying and achieving the proper accessibility goals, there's nothing expensive or difficult about it. The expenses come in because you're going to get sued if you don't address it in many cases. So it's expensive if you ignore it. It's expensive if you keep providing experiences that are not accessible. And then the next thing you know, you're being sued. Institutions of higher learning have started to be sued because they don't provide accessible experiences. Even the musical artist Beyonce was sued because her website was not accessible, and it ended up costing them because of that. So don't believe the myth that accessibility is expensive or difficult. Make sure that all you have to do is take the appropriate steps, approach it the right way, and you have offset expenses and you've offset the difficulty, the assumed difficulty associated with this. So how about 3 bonus myths? These are not on the site. These are either detrimental or reflective of poor UX maturity. 3 I just want to call out here. I mentioned one earlier because myths also extend to the way that we approach the discipline. things associated with the discipline, most notably with the extended myth number one that I've got here. It has to do with telling people to put themselves out there. Look at any discipline in the world. Do you really tell people who are new to put themselves out there? Do you really do that? Is that really fitting? Is that going to result in a good thing for people who do not know very much, for people who do not have filters, for people whose goal is simply to be seen, not to help, not to drive success, just to be seen, to become a celebrity in many cases? That concept, without looking at any people, without looking at any content, the things I just mentioned let you know that that is dangerous. That's not something that we want to do. But a lot of people have put themselves out there. And I mentioned it earlier in this episode. When people put themselves out there, a lot of times all it did was start the spread of misinformation, it was non-existent in 2011. It's off the charts today because people put themselves out there. One of the most common put themselves out there moments was on LinkedIn, where people would put two designs and say, which one is better, design one or design two? But they weren't doing that because they were trying to help further UX education. They were just trying to be seen. And they would get, I've seen 500, 800 likes, people commenting all over the place, making the thing go viral. So now more people are seeing it because somebody put themselves out there, where the content that actually was helping people was being ignored. It was being pushed down by the algorithm because the algorithm said that the weird misinformation thing, the post that actually contributed to detrimentally impacting UX maturity, was more important. So now futures are being determined by algorithms that are miscalculating. Putting yourself out there was never a good value proposition. It was never a proper thing to do. If you want to get out there, if you want to start connecting with people, I understand that. Tell your story. I say that all the time. If you're just getting started in UX, you don't have a lot to say. You don't have a lot to share, but you do have a story. Share your story. What are you encountering? What happened to you when you went and had an interview, and the things that you experienced in that interview? You don't have to say what company it was, but the things that you experience are going to help other people that are behind you. If we all take the time to pull each other up, everybody will be better off. But if people are trying to get out there and just do things to further their own celebrity, their own status, to make their name more recognizable, and other little silly things associated with celebritism, those things are reflective of bad UX maturity, low UX maturity, and they detrimentally impact discipline-wide UX maturity. So not good. Bonus UX myth number 2. Somebody the other day was talking about, here are 5 UX laws you really need to pay attention to. Folks, there aren't any UX laws. The concept of laws of UX was something that was concocted, where somebody went and curated a bunch of laws, rules, principles. They put all of these things together. They created icons associated with each one of them and began going out and talking about it. And I remember when that started, and it was done by somebody who was a visual designer, not a person who had been doing UX for any length of time. It was created by a person who was a visual designer, and they used the cult of aesthetics to further and foster what it was that they were trying to sell and share to the UX community. And they took things like Fitts Law. They took things like Gestalt principles, and they took those and they created an icon, and they started to push these. Now, the points that were being made are good, but these things all existed. Now, I was already studying those through Interaction Design Foundation. All of those, what people are now referring to as laws, were already there. If you went to the human computer interaction encyclopedia that they had on the website, if you go and check that out at interaction-design.org, if you go and check that out, you will see that all of that content already existed. Now, did we need somebody to curate them and then present them for better consumption. Did we need to do that? No, we didn't need to do that. The fact that they did it is not even a crime. I'm not saying that, and more power to the person that did it. I know the person that did it. I know the author. But the concept to package these, to repackage them as laws, and then put them out there instead of just pointing people to what already existed, that's the problem that's here. Because people were not acknowledging the fact that these concepts already existed. So they're approaching it from the wrong angle. All of those things that are in the book already existed. None of those things were created. None of those things are original ideas. None of them are. They're all curated, not created. And so when people take in information, to take information that has been repackaged and then look at it as if the repackage is the introduction of the thing is an inappropriate way to approach content. So just trying to help people put your ducks in a row. Go and study those principles in their original element. Don't make somebody rich by looking at something through the wrong lens, looking at something through a way that, in a sense, there's an element of fabrication that is associated with it. Again, not condemning the way that it was curated, but present it the right way. And I'm sure that things were cited the right way and things of that nature, but that's not the way people are taking it in. And we are responsible for the way people take information in. And that's why when I finish my PhD, you have to do this dissertation. You have a thought that you're presenting and you're building upon other people's thoughts. And in the back of every dissertation, every peer-reviewed paper pretty much is a bibliography. All the references, this thought came from or was based on what this person said at this particular point in time. And so we're building a thought based on things that already exist. And you basically are proving that you're not a plagiarist in the process. If anybody presents someone else's thoughts as their own and they're not building upon something, you've got a problem. And plagiarism, I'm not trying to associate plagiarism with this, but it is close. And folks need to understand that today. And this has been popularized in UX circles. Please go back and look at that thoughts that exist in their original state and in their original context so that you can digest it that way and look at it that way and respect the original source the way that you should, instead of looking at curators and putting them on a pedestal, because that is inappropriate. And I'm not faulting the person on that, and I'm faulting the people who do it. Now, you fly a person halfway around the world to come and speak at an event to talk about something that was curated? That doesn't make any sense. Just go back and look at the original state. Do that. And we've got that problem in UX, period. People do not want to give props to those who preceded them, and that's inappropriate. And no discipline on the earth does that. You have to give flowers where flowers are due. And if somebody came up with a concept, respect what they did, dive into what they did, study what they did, and you're going to be better off for it. And everybody's going to be better off for it, because now you're indirectly teaching other people to give honor where honor is due. And that's just the appropriate way to proceed. Bonus myth number 3 says that anybody can do UX. That is not true. Can anybody come into UX? Generally speaking, sure. Yeah, you can do that. You want to come into UX? More power to you. I'll do what I can to help you out within reason. But back to the point at hand, it takes a certain type of a persona to do UX the right way. It takes a certain type of persona to excel at UX. The mindset that anybody can do UX is actually inaccurate, because some people don't have the psychological, mental, or emotional makeup to do the work the right way, which is one of the reasons why the discipline has gone off the rails the way that it has, because a lot of people came into UX chasing checks, chasing prestige, chasing what they thought was an easy way to do some work while making a lot of money doing it. And these people came into the discipline and bastardized it, especially a lot of the visual designers who came into UX and never really transitioned. They never respected it. They don't know the history, and they do UX the same way that they did their visual design. So visual design was always an ego-driven type of a work. And so they came into UX and they tried to engage in UX from an ego-based perspective. And in doing the work from that perspective and not respecting the work the way it was supposed to be done, they turned UX into something that it is not. That's where the whole UX UI thing came from. UX UI, I love Dr. Nick Fine said this recently. It's such a phenomenal statement. When you see somebody say UX UI, they're actually recoding what visual design is. They don't say visual design anymore. Now they say UX UI. That means it's referring to visual design. When you see that in a job description, they're talking about visual design. When you see that, a job posting, and somebody says, we're looking for somebody with UX UI skills, they're talking about a visual designer. They're not talking about anybody who knows anything about heuristics. They're not talking about anybody who knows anything about information architecture. They're talking about somebody who's going to make things pretty. And they're going to try to approach their business goals based on pretty. And nobody's going to achieve business goals based on pretty. We're not talking about designing clothes here. We're designing something that people interact with. We're talking about trying to use an interface as a means to an end. We're not talking about looks. Looks are not going to cut it. It's got to function right. It's got to be reflective of mental models. And it takes a certain mindset in order for someone to take on a position, a role, a set of responsibilities to approach the work the right way. So from that perspective, can anybody do UX? Nope. Because a lot of people don't want to submit to the principles. See, visual design is anarchical. To a degree, it's anarchical because you can do anything. Art is anarchical. You can do anything. Walk into any art museum. There's no set rules. People do anything. Was Picasso following rules? To some extent, possibly yes, somebody would argue. But all that abstract work, abstract in particular, when you see abstract work being done, there's no rules. They're just splattering paint onto a canvas and they're doing whatever. And they may or may not be recognized or respected or regarded for what they do. But when you come into the world of UX, there are principles, there are methods, there are methodologies, there are things that need to be approaches that need to be followed in order to achieve the proper goal, to solve the problem that design solves. So from that perspective, folks, can anybody do UX? No, again, no, and no. So folks, in closing, misinformation is real. UX myths abound. There are 34 on that website, on uxmyths.com. I gave you 3. I've probably got 200. I could come up with 200 myths and probably still keep digging because they just keep spreading. More and more myths just keep being produced. You hear them on a regular basis. All you have to do is sit on LinkedIn and myths are going to pop up. Nope, that's not true. Nope, that's not true. LinkedIn suggests content on a daily basis. I know many of you see this the same way I do. And not one time in the thousands of suggested content experiences that I've had on LinkedIn, not one time has LinkedIn suggested any content for me. That's for me. Maybe for you, the number might be a tad different, not too much different. The content that LinkedIn suggests for me has never been relevant or valuable, useful, and is most often inaccurate. It most often contains some myths, some degree of misinformation, and it's just so disgusting to see it. I am cognitively just sickened. I think nauseated is the word I was looking for by the things that I see out there many times. So UX myths abound, and it's something we just have to deal with. And lastly, to overcome UX myths, again, it's all about UX maturity, folks. Keep growing, keep learning, keep developing that filter Learn to become more selective about what you partake of, whether it's a podcast, whether it's books, whether it is any website content, blogs, anything. Be more selective. And the more you learn, the more you grow from the perspective of personal UX maturity, the more selective you will naturally become. Then you'll be better off for it. You will positively and properly impact the discipline-wide levels of UX maturity, and you can be celebrated. You're going to help your team. You're going to help everybody that you talk to, everybody that you try to encourage and inform. Everyone's success is dependent upon UX maturity. You know, that thing that some folks said could go away. I'm trying to prove just how important it is. We need to embrace it, and we need to proceed accordingly. Well, that's it, folks. UX maturity and myth management. We hope you got a lot out of that today. Folks, don't forget to like, don't forget to subscribe, don't forget to share the podcast with your friends out there. Don't forget to check out some of the new content, the new World of UX with Dr. Darren Hood content out on kaizentees.com. Get your cups, get your caps, get some shirts. Help us out. Anything that you do out there helps in the production of the show. So until next time, this is Dr. Darren Hood, the host of the World of UX, wishing everybody all the best. And until next week, happy UXing, everybody.